friends, we have one of the great race engineers, also just a good friend, super smart guy. Oh, by the way, happened to win 4 consecutive Champ Car championships with Newman Haas Racing, and some Frenchmen are referred to as French fry, Sebastien Bourdais. This is the, all caps, Craig Hampson. We are here with this 2005 Lola, used to earn 7 pole positions, 7 race wins in Champ Car, and the 2006 Champ Car title. And since you were the guy who helped develop this Lola, possibly the highest level of Lola art, I figured who better to ask about this to show us some of the special things you did back in the period that made this car so devastating.
Well, I appreciate the chance. It's so exciting to see it like out here in the wild in its native environment, finally back on a track. That's great. All credit to Bernie Haas and the folks at Newman Haas Racing, Don Hovell and his group, for getting it in full bore running state. So that's super exciting. It was a neat era of racing because though it was kind of spec, everybody had a Lola by 2006. You were allowed to change a lot on the car. You could make your own suspension, you could make your own aerodynamic bits, you could change bodywork, a lot more than we can do now in the spec era of IndyCar racing. There were several teams with major aero programs, not just us at Newman Haas, but Forsyth spent a lot of money, Sport spent a lot of money, even HVM did quite a bit of aero work, and so you'd watch everybody and see what they developed, and if they seemed to have something good, you'd have to copy it. You ended up doing a lot of things, and other people copied that. Plus there was a lot of mechanical work, making of suspension parts, that you're not simply able to do that now. Looking at the front of the car, we made these pylon mounts for the front wing. That allowed more air to go underneath the bottom of the car into the underwing. We also had spacers, and we would vary the front wing height depending upon the static or cornering ride height of the car. Wow. Basically, if the car's higher off the ground, like at a street course, we would space the front wing down. Originally, they were like milled aluminum, but eventually Rocky made an aluminum spine with a carbon cover, and that was lighter. These bits are not stock Lola. I know the HVM team did these triangles out here first, and then there were smaller versions of these turning vanes, and we made larger turning vanes. These are front wing main plane trailing edge extensions. Yeah. They moved the aero balance forward. Very often when the track grip was low and you didn't want to run as much aero balance, you'd start without them. And then as the track gripped up, you would add them in, and then you'd have more aero balance. Front suspension was all done by the team. And aerodynamics as well play a big part here. Oh, absolutely. So the toe link, you can see it's an aerodynamic shape. It's even got that little extension there. Out at the steering arm, there's a snubber that keeps it at a nose-down angle, and it stays that way even though it's steering. You can see that the push rods have an aerodynamic trailing edge, and they're actually set at a specific angle. And then down here, you can see the way it's mounted. That's a flexure. There's no monoball, there's no pivoting joint. It is rigid to the chassis. It's made from titanium and then bolted into the steel structure here. Has a very low spring rate, but then there's no friction either. So we had those, we developed those. Here at the inlet of the underwing, one of the cool things about the Lola is that the air inlet for the underwing, what we call the thumbprint, it's really tall. And that made it a very friendly aerodynamic car. It was not front ride height sensitive. If you were bottoming too much under braking, you could raise it a couple flats and it really wouldn't bother it. So this thumbprint gave it that really nice underwing characteristic. Then these vortex generators or turning vanes inside, we made different ones of those. Originally they were symmetrically spaced, but you can see we actually moved the position of these ones, and it made a better ride height characteristic in terms of not losing downforce as the front went up and down. Mirror placement as well. Yeah, so what happened there is we ran in the Indy 500, and the panos we ran had mirrors that looked like this. And it caused us to say, that actually might be less drag. So we made some versions, and we actually had different shapes and tried them in the wind tunnel. And we're talking small things like 1 pound of drag at 200 miles an hour. But what you do is you add together 100 little good things, and you really get a significant difference. So those we made, and I know people copied those. You know, this was the last IndyCar Champ Car where you had to manually shift gears, right? There's a sequential shift lever, and it has a switch in there that tells the engine to do the shift without lift. But the guys had to drive with one hand a lot of the time, and they'd end the races with like blisters on their hands and stuff. It's a really different era than now, where they can keep both hands on the wheel because they have the paddles.
A lot of work going on here as well, Craig.
Yeah, so going back to the rear wing, we have what was called a diamond tip rear wing wicker, and that actually set off vortices coming off the wing tips here. And if you look even at the detail of the trailing edge of the rear wing end plate, it has this radius here. So the wicker adds some drag, but it really increases the downforce, and this radius helped make that wicker even more effective. Have the louvers in here. The F1 cars started to develop those about in this era, and we went, well, F1 cars have them, we should try to figure this out. And so I remember we made different end plates with like 2, 1, 3, 4, tried to figure out the best position to make the rear wing more effective. The engine covers off, so you can see the engine. IndyCars now are a V6. This was a V8, 2.65 liters, ran on methanol. We don't run on methanol anymore.
It's so great smelling that methanol, though. It got to your eyes water, but great memories.
Oh, absolutely. So there is a turbocharger, but there's only one. IndyCars now have two, but there's one really big turbocharger inside the bell housing here. And it compresses the air and blows it up through this inlet trumpet, and that's the air plenum. So the pressurized air is in there. That is controls the boost level to keep it consistent and not above what you were supposed to make. These are actually fuel injectors here. So there was fuel going inside the plenum, but there were also these pre-plenum injectors. These dampers are dynamic dampers, DSSVs. Newman Haas Racing, Haas Auto had, and actually Haas Auto still does, has a relationship with dynamics. Really cool because the spool valves, you could change the shape of the damping with this tiny little valve that had a cutout in it, and the shape of the window would affect the damping. So they're 4-way adjustable, high speed and low speed. And then there's also a blow off inside that we could flatten the damper curve off over really big bumps. Right here, there could be a third spring or a third damper.
Yep.
There isn't one on the car right now, and if it was a road course, we wouldn't run the additional damper here, but at the street courses, which were bumpier and also a higher rear ride height, we would typically run a damper here. It also had a G valve, so under braking, when you exceeded a certain amount of braking, it would increase the rebound, so the back of the car wouldn't come up as much.
So smart.
These things here are called tire shelf gurney flaps.
Tire shelf gurney flaps.
Right, they affect the way the air goes around the rear tire and then over the top of the underwing. There was a lot of playing with those for different downforce levels. You know, if you're going to Elkhart Lake or a fast oval versus a Long Beach kind of slower street course. These flip-ups here were stock Lola, but eventually the teams evolved a second one, and then there was eventually a cutout here. It's just so cool seeing it all again.
It comes back to mind, Craig, seeing one of the cars that, again, you had a lot of success with, but nostalgia, love.
Yeah, I mean, it was professionally probably the best part of my career. You know, Sebastien and the team and I achieved a tremendous amount of success together, but also I would say it was the most fun because you could develop and modify parts of the car. You could get creative, you could come up with new ideas, and we had the ability to actually realize some of those and put them onto the car. There was a place to make your mousetrap better than somebody else's, and that was really, really cool. Yeah, I mean, they really rocketed off corners in a pretty impressive way, and they would eat up rear tires, and you had to treat them with kid gloves, because if you didn't, it could bite you. Just really happy to see all my former coworkers, and good to see it out on a track.